Some players crumble under the weight of their mistakes. Others use that pressure to forge something unbreakable. Right now, Ja Morant sits at the crossroads between redemption and repeated disappointment, and the entire basketball world is watching to see which path he'll choose. The question isn't whether he can bounce back from adversity, it's whether he can transform his darkest moments into the foundation of greatness. The story of Ja Morant's fall from grace reads like a cautionary tale about social media and poor judgment. Two separate incidents involving firearms on Instagram Live turned the Memphis superstar from must-watch entertainment into a league-wide controversy. The first incident in March 2023 earned him an 8-game suspension and a stern warning from the NBA. But just 2 months later, he was back in the headlines for the exact same behavior. This time, the consequences were severe. A 25-game suspension that would cost him millions and shake the foundation of his career. What made it worse wasn't just the repetition, but the timing. He just signed a massive contract extension, positioning himself as the face of the Memphis franchise. Instead of celebrating his arrival as a bona fide superstar, he was facing questions about his maturity and decision-making that went far beyond basketball. But the universe wasn't finished testing Ja Morant's resolve. After serving his suspension and making his highly anticipated return in December 2023, disaster struck again. Just 9 games into his comeback, he suffered a season-ending shoulder injury during practice. The subluxation required surgery and ended any hope of salvaging what remained of the season. Think about that timeline for a second. From the peak of his career to rock bottom in less than 12 months. He went from signing a max contract to watching his team from the sidelines, dealing with criticism that questioned whether he could ever be the reliable superstar Memphis needed. Some athletes never recover from that kind of emotional and physical devastation. The combination of public humiliation and career-threatening injury has broken stronger players than Morant. Here's where the story gets interesting, though. During his time away from the game, something shifted in Morant's approach to basketball and life. People close to the organization started noticing changes in how he carried himself, how he prepared, and how he talked about his responsibilities as a leader. The suspension and injury forced him into a period of reflection that he'd never experienced before. He couldn't just rely on his otherworldly athleticism to solve problems anymore. He had to confront the reality that his on-court decisions were threatening to overshadow his on-court brilliance. The kid who once dunked his way out of every difficult situation had to learn how to think his way through adversity. That transformation doesn't happen overnight, but the early signs suggested something fundamental had changed in his mindset. The 2024-25 season was supposed to be Morant's redemption tour, but even that hasn't gone according to plan. He's appeared in just 20 of Memphis's 36 games so far this season, dealing with a right AC joint sprain that's kept him out of the last 4 contests. The availability issues that plagued him last season are creeping back, raising uncomfortable questions about whether his body can handle the explosive style that made him famous. Coach Taylor Jenkins recently said Morant is progressing well, but the pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Every time he builds momentum, something derails the progress. It's the kind of frustrating cycle that can break a player's confidence and make fans question whether he'll ever be the consistent superstar they thought they were getting when Memphis handed him that max contract. But here's the plot twist that nobody saw coming. The Grizzlies are thriving without him. At 22-13, they're sitting pretty in 3rd place in the brutal Western Conference, just percentage points behind the 2nd-seeded Houston Rockets. The team that was supposed to be completely dependent on Morant's brilliance has discovered they can win games with defense, depth, and collective effort. Players like Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Marcus Smart have stepped up to fill the leadership void. What was meant to be Memphis's biggest weakness, playing without their franchise player, has become evidence of their organizational strength. The question is whether this success makes Morant more valuable when he returns, or whether it proves the team doesn't need him as much as everyone thought they were. This is where Ja Morant's story becomes truly fascinating from a psychological perspective. The greatest comeback stories in sports history share one common thread. The star player uses adversity as fuel rather than letting it consume them. Michael Jordan's gambling controversies and first retirement, Kobe Bryant's legal troubles and Achilles injury, LeBron James' decision fallout and 2011 finals collapse. Each of these superstars faced moments where their legacy hung in the balance, and each found a way to transform criticism into motivation. Morant is at that exact crossroads right now. He can either let the setbacks define him, or he can use them as the foundation for something greater than anyone imagined. The difference between those who survive and those who thrive often comes down to how they process failure and whether they can maintain belief in themselves when the world starts to doubt them. The stakes couldn't be higher for Morant's legacy and Memphis's championship aspirations. The Western Conference is absolutely loaded right now, with teams like Oklahoma City, Denver, and Phoenix all making moves to compete for titles. The Grizzlies' championship window won't stay open forever, especially with other young cores around the league hitting their prime. If Morant can stay healthy and channel his experiences into a more mature leadership, Memphis becomes a legitimate threat to anyone in a 7-game series. But if the availability issues continue and the off-court questions linger, this franchise might have to consider whether their ceiling is higher with or without their supposed franchise cornerstone. That's not a conversation anyone in Memphis wants to have, but it's becoming harder to avoid with each missed game and each reminder of how well the team plays in his absence. The most compelling aspect of Ja Morant's story isn't just whether he can make a successful comeback, it's whether he can redefine what success looks like for a player with his skill set and baggage. Maybe the explosive highlight reel dunks that made him famous aren't sustainable long-term. Maybe his true greatness lies in becoming a more complete floor general who picks his spots and prioritizes winning over individual brilliance. The shoulder injury and recent struggles might be forcing him toward an evolution that ultimately makes him better, even if it makes him less spectacular on social media. Sometimes the greatest comeback stories aren't about returning to who you were, but about discovering who you're capable of becoming when everything you thought you knew about yourself gets stripped away. Right now, Ja Morant is writing the most important chapter of his career, and nobody knows how it ends. He's shown flashes of the player who can single-handedly change the trajectory of a franchise, but he's also demonstrated a pattern of self-sabotage that threatens to waste one of the most gifted basketball talents of his generation. The consequences of his past mistakes aren't disappearing, but they don't have to define his future either. Whether he becomes a cautionary tale or a redemption story depends entirely on the choices he makes from this moment forward. And based on everything we've seen from Memphis this season, those choices might determine not just his individual legacy, but whether this Grizzlies core can achieve the championship dreams that once seemed inevitable. The comeback story is still being written, but the ending is far from guaranteed.